For the next part in our Axis and Allies Global 1940 2nd Edition tutorial series, we're going to go over the basic options and strategies for the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is one of the 5 major powers in this game. They're one of the major powers in all of the Axis and Allies World War II era games. They're very, very important. They're going to be pretty defensive in nature for the most part. Their strategies, I tend to think, are pretty easy to explain for the format I'm doing. You can just get lost in the weeds with the more specifics. This episode, I'll probably go into more detail into each individual option you have, simply because there aren't that many and they're all different flavors of the same thing. So as the Soviet Union, your main goal is to absorb Germany, to absorb as many German resources as possible. Typically, in my games, once the Soviet Union falls, the game usually ends. The Allies usually surrender shortly after. So as the Soviet Union, you just want to exist, to just be a thorn in the Axis side, absorb as many resources as possible to give the Western Allies time to make a breakthrough elsewhere. And eventually, later in the game, maybe you will be able to launch an offensive, and you might actually start pushing towards Berlin. I can't say it's a super likely thing. I haven't seen it very often, but stranger things have happened. So the first things you should do as a Soviet Union on your turn, let's assume that Germany's they're not going for G1. They're not attacking you on turn 1. So the things I think you should do is, these ships here, you should move them here. Even if those German ships are still there, you're allowed to be in the same sea zone with them as long as you're neutral. Once you go to war, you'd have to still fight. The reason to move your ships there is so if Germany decides they're going to go to war with you at turn 2 or whenever, they can't immediately start dropping troops from Sea Zone 115 into Leningrad. If all your ships were still here in Sea Zone 115, they'd be able to go there, fight the ships, and land all in one turn. If your ships are here, they have to fight them, and then next turn, they can land over there. So it buys you a little bit of time, which is kind of your bread and butter as the Soviet Union. Your submarine in Sea Zone 127, I think you should move that to Sea Zone 125 here for this convoy zone to disrupt Norway a little bit. Won't make a massive difference, but any bit helps. All of your stuff in the west here, I would be moving it and consolidating it. So always leave one unit behind, because you don't want Germany blitzing through any of your territories. You got a lot of land to protect, and you don't want Germany to get any of it for free. Sure, just one guy is probably going to fall very quickly, but he's just there to buy you time. Generally, I would say form the bulk of your armies into 2 spaces. I would go in Belarus and in Western Ukraine. That's where I typically tend to put my largest stacks of units as the Soviet Union, because from there you're able to attack wherever any German thrust might appear. If they go for Eastern Poland, you can attack them with everything. And even if you don't destroy that big German stack, you're going to damage it enough that they're not going to be able to push as fast as they want to, buying more time. I don't always think you should attack. It's called giving them a bloody nose. I don't always think you should just launch a quick jab at them. There are certain circumstances where, yes, it's definitely advisable, but others in which it's not. Leningrad, I typically just don't even plan on holding it. It's too far away from everything else. It's too close to Germany. You're not going to be able to keep it for that long. So typically, once they've taken the Baltic states, if I'm not able to attack that stack and beat it, I'm going to pull my troops from Leningrad and Belarus back to Archangel and Smolensk. Again, when I do that, always leave a guy behind. That way he can just block any advance. You don't have to worry about that here, because these facilities, they'll do the same thing. They'll block any blitzing tanks. If the German stack is still too strong at Smolensk or Archangel, you can fall back to Moscow. That's a good place to make a final stand. I wouldn't give up Moscow if you can help it. Not unless you're going to get something big out of it. Like if you're going to guarantee you can take out half of Germany's army and then be able to go back and retake Moscow, then sure, maybe that's worth it. Another thing I see a lot of people do is down here in the Middle East, going through northwest Persia, and then the next turn going into Iraq. The rationale behind that is Iraq is more valuable to the Soviets than anyone else because they have a national objective that states if they control an original Axis territory or a pro-Axis neutral, they get an extra 3 IPCs. So instead of that territory being worth 2 to everyone else, to the Soviets, it's really worth 5. Now, keep in mind, if you take that, that's income not going to the British, but, oh well. You just have to talk that out with your Soviet player. And sometimes you might not have the time or the ability to divert any resources down there to take Iraq. Next, let's talk about these guys over here. Your 18 infantry and your 2 AA guns. I would say just pull these back to your western front. You want to pull them back to Moscow, I would say. They're not really doing much out here, and they can't really do that much. They're just infantry. They don't have a lot of offensive abilities. Japan, if they want to destroy them, they can very easily. There's nothing you can really do about it. You'll never really be able to reinforce anything on this side of the board. It's just not going to happen. I guess you could take those troops, come around, and go into northwestern China and help the Chinese out. But if you do that, you're going to avoid the Mongolian rule. It's not that big a deal. It's only 6 infantry you're missing out on, but it's still something to be aware of. Generally, I just wouldn't concern myself with Japan that much. I'd just pull all those infantry back to Europe. Europe is where all your money is. Europe's where you need to be focused, is the Soviets. Now, let's talk about units. What should you be building as the Soviet Union? This is another thing where I've heard several different weird, or at least I think are weird unit compositions. I would say your bread and butter is infantry and artillery. You have your infantry for your defense, and you have your artillery for a little bit of attack, a little bit of offensive punch if you need it. But the Soviets, you should not be focused on offensive units. You shouldn't be building a lot of bombers. You shouldn't be building a lot of strategic bombers or anything like that. Don't ever build ships. If you're building ships as the Soviet Union, you're doing something wrong. I guess you're working with the Axis at that point. But it's the units that lie in the middle that you can make more of an argument for, that there are more edge cases for. Namely, tanks. I've seen a lot of people really like building tanks as the Soviet Union, having big stacks of them. And I guess I can see the appeal, but I don't love it as much because I see tanks as more of an offensive unit than anything. And each tank that you build is 2 infantry that you don't have. As the Soviets, I feel like you don't need to maneuver as much. You just kind of need to pick a few territories and hunker down in them and let the Germans come to you. But I understand that they can still be very useful. So that's potentially a good way to go depending on what you're up against. I've seen a few people want to go heavy into an air force. That's in quotation marks. I never really build planes as the Soviets, but some people do like them. I've seen some people advocate for building a few strategic bombers or tactical bombers. While I don't love that, again, like the tanks, I could see it potentially being useful in certain edge cases. But yeah, that's the bulk of your Soviet stuff. You're just trying to survive. You're trying to buy time. You're not going to be launching these huge offensives. You're not going to be pushing into Poland. By the time you get to original German territory, the game is probably over. Japan, I really wouldn't worry about Japan. They're too far away, and they have too much for you to be able to deal with. Sure, you can help China out a little bit. Sure, you can go into the Middle East if you have the time. The only other real option you have, I suppose, is up here around Norway, Sweden, and Finland. If Germany's going for like a southern strategy, if they're trying to go to Ukraine and then Stalingrad, and we're assuming they're ignoring Leningrad, or at least they're going to be slower, you could go into Finland and Norway, and that's an extra 6 IPCs from your national objective, plus the 5 that the territories are worth. That's a lot of money, and you're denying Germany a national objective. So potentially that could be awesome. I wouldn't waste a lot of resources on it because I don't think you'll be able to hold them forever, especially if they still have that German transport there. But, it's something you can use to get a little bit of extra money and buy more time. That's the name of the game, is the Soviet Union. And overall, as the Allies in general, buying time, making the game drag out. That's what you want to do. You have more money than a lot of your enemies. So you just need to hunker down and wait and let them just grind themselves down.